There we go. All right, hello. My name is Sam Swenson, and this is the Unit 2 hearing for We the People Nationals Finals. In a moment, I'm going to have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we'll begin the hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judges' questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing, but I will be holding up these placards to let you know the time at their appropriate intervals. I suggest that you have gallery view on instead of speaker view, and at the conclusion of the hearing, judges will give brief feedback to the teams, and then you'll conclude. I have begun the recording, and now the judges will introduce themselves.
All right. Good morning, North Carolina. Where in North Carolina are you from?
We're in Raleigh, North Carolina.
In Raleigh. Okay. All right. Well, good morning. I'm Jack Barlow. I'm in the politics department at Juniata College here in Pennsylvania, and I will ask my other judges to introduce themselves. Dr. Allison.
I am Robert Allison. I teach history at Suffolk University, which is in Boston, Massachusetts, and it's really a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Good morning. I'm Lindsay Draper. I'm retired from the juvenile court bench here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Currently Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion of the Institute for Lawyer Wellbeing.
Judge Draper, I'm just trying to shake things up here a little bit.
You know, you understand how to say, okay, I'm gonna disorient him one more time. You're doing, and these kids have no idea what's happening right now.
Nope. All right. Would you introduce yourselves and your teacher, please?
My name is Charlie Ramquist.
I'm Sawyer King.
I'm Katie Vick, and we're all seniors at Raleigh Charter High School, and Miss Klein is our teacher.
Welcome. Thank you. This is your teacher has been working very hard on this for the whole year, actually for more than a year, because we've seen her here before. So we know that she knows what she's doing, but it's also a lot of work. So you should really thank her, because you're going to find that this is excellent preparation for when you get to college. So, and she's responsible for it. Okay, so this is Unit 2. How did the framers create the Constitution? Not a wide choice of questions this year, so we're just going to ask question 1 today. And it goes like this, and you'll start your prepared statement in a minute. Question 1, what were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made in the Constitution? Please begin.
The issue of representation was one of the most heated discussions during the convention. James Madison proposed the Virginia Plan, which created a strong central government that could create laws, impose taxes, and have power directly over the people. The federal government would have 3 branches, the legislative branch being the most powerful. Congress would consist of 2 proportional houses, one elected by the people and the upper house elected by the lower house. The New Jersey Plan kept the framework of the Articles of Confederation. It just increased the power of the unicameral Congress. Under the New Jersey Plan, each state had 1 vote in Congress. Some delegates argued in favor of the New Jersey Plan to ensure their state sovereignty wasn't undermined by the larger states. The Connecticut Compromise ultimately solved the issue by offering a bicameral legislature where the seats in the House are based on population and the seats in the Senate had 2 seats per state.
The delegates who opposed slavery knew heavy restrictions on slavery would make it impossible to agree. Slave labor was the driving force of landowners' economic prosperity in the South. Delegates came up with a 3/5 compromise, which stated every 5 enslaved people would count for 3 people. This allowed Southern states to include enslaved people in their population, giving Southern states more representation but higher taxes. The delegates also decided that Congress should not ban the international slave trade until 1808. The Fugitive Slave Act was also discussed and supported by Southern delegates as it protected slavery, which upset Northern abolitionists.
Despite the advocacy of George Mason, the topic of the Bill of Rights was quickly dismissed at the convention because the delegates had faith in the ability of the Constitution's restrictions on the government to protect each citizen's rights. They felt protection would be provided by checks and balances, separation of powers, and federalism. Hamilton's Federalist Paper 84 argued that rights are implied in the Constitution. Anti-Federalists argued against this because they didn't want rights left to interpretation. They feared the lack of a Bill of Rights would allow the government to violate basic rights. The backlash influenced many Federalists to draft and propose a Bill of Rights, which was later promised during the ratifying conventions to be added as the first amendments to the Constitution.
Some issues were not well addressed during the convention. The drafted Constitution said nothing explicitly about national citizenship. Similarly, the Constitution was silent about voting rights while states had individual laws determining who could vote based on property or other qualifications. The Constitution gave states nearly full discretion when determining voting rights.
I believe that the 17th Amendment should be repealed. It is the only amendment that directly alters the plans of the framers. They built Congress to be a bicameral legislature with one body representing the people and the other representing the states. The amendment was passed in 1913 to address corruption within the state governments. They believe Senate seats are being used as voting bargaining chips. Corruption is now greatly diminished, so the amendment is outdated and undermines the federalism the framers had intended.
We also believe due to the Eighth Amendment, capital punishment should be banned. Capital punishment is an intolerable denial of civil liberties and is inconsistent with the fundamental values of our democratic system. The Supreme Court has already put some restrictions in place prohibiting the executions of people with intellectual disabilities as well as those under 16. There is no benefit to capital punishment. It has no impact on public safety. It's a waste of taxpayer funds, and innocent people are too often sentenced to death. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to continue with your 17th Amendment discussion because I think this is interesting. Would you advocate for making the Senate proportional? Madison thought that this was going to be the death of the Constitution, right? When he was at the convention, because he said, you know, it's just going to make good government impossible. So along with your 17th Amendment reform, or maybe in place of your 17th Amendment reform, should we make the Senate a proportional body?
I do think that the Senate should be a proportional body. As you said, Madison believed that the Great Compromise was just added to conciliate the smaller states. Smaller states being overrepresented in the Senate is a bit outdated, just with how connected our country is now. Yeah.
I agree with Sawyer because at the time when the Constitution was passed and prior to Abraham Lincoln, it was always the United States are, but afterwards it became the United States is. We're now viewed as one country rather than the individual states. So I think proportional representation is more essential today than it was then because we are one country rather than individual states working together.
I agree. I also believe that the Senate should be proportional. I think what Charlie was saying about how we are one country now and we're trying to become more united. We've seen a lot of issues within the past year that our country is becoming extremely divided. And I think with having the whole government system be proportional, it would allow for every state's voice to be heard, but based on how many people that they represent.
As a resident in the state of Wisconsin and part of the country that's frequently referred to as flyover country, how do we in Wisconsin not end up being swamped by what the people along the coast are interested in? How do we make sure that, for instance, agricultural issues stay in the American forefront if we do this proportionally?
Well, I mean, and that's the entire idea behind repealing the 17th Amendment, is that the power, even though it may be proportional seats, the power would still go back to the state legislatures. The states still operate independently. We still have a federalism system. So when the senators are coming from the state legislature, they're still bringing the ideas and the needs of the states forward in Congress. While it may not be as powerful as it had been prior, it's still that direct and refined view of the people from the state. Just like how James Madison had stated during the Constitutional Convention that the or during one of his Federalist papers, that the purpose of Congress is to refine and enlarge the people's view, and that's the entire idea of having those senators for the states. Even though it may be proportional, they'll still be presenting it on that larger, grander view in Congress.
If
Okay.
I believe,
Go on, Lindsay.
if I believe that for some reason, a lot of Americans have opted to live on the coast, and those of us in the center just, I don't know, have to feed you all. Why would it not be important for us to have a say in how the federal budget goes? Because we need to be sure that there are protections for us that a whole bunch of you all wouldn't think important. Why wouldn't it be important to save that?
Well, I think it is crucial to say that. I mean, just like you said, you have the states on the coastline, but you still have lots of people in the central the central area of the United States of America. I mean, you still have people there that are they are the votes in Congress. They're the reason why they're the seats in Congress, because they are people, they have voices. And that's also part of the purpose of the representatives in the House, because the entire idea is that you have the voices of the people directly there. If they feel like something unjust is occurring in terms of legislation, whether it be the budget, they're the ones to be able to have their voices be presented. And that's why you have to have a majority, because we don't have a majority on just like a couple of states. You have to have a huge number of states, no matter their population. Sure, California has a much greater population than Wisconsin, but there's still, California on its own is not going to take up the majority of Congress.
Uh,
I'm wondering, no, yes, go on, Katie.
Oh, it's okay. You're fine. Go ahead.
No, go on. No, go on.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it was interesting because what Charlie was talking about kind of goes along with like the Electoral College, and how today, if the Electoral College were to be abolished, that's something that we've talked about in our group a lot. If the Electoral College were to be abolished, presidential candidates would be insensitized to focus more of their efforts on bigger states, like you were saying, Mr. Draper. And then they would be leaving smaller states like Iowa or even Wisconsin left out in the cold. And this would without the balancing effect of the Electoral College, those few densely populated areas in the country like California and New York would determine the outcome of elections and also a lot of our legislation. And this would also cause the wishes of rural America to go unheard, and especially with like farming issues like you were talking about.
Kind of anticipated the question I was going to ask is, would you agree with Hamilton's idea of abolishing the states altogether?
I would not, because I think personally there's a lot of power in the federalism system. I think there's a lot of power, and like Mr. Draper was saying, states operate and the needs of each state is independent from what the people born in them may be. And so it's important to be able to have the states and address individual needs on a much closer and refined level. And that's the value, because no bill that's going to be passed in the federal government is going to be a one size fits all for every single person in the country. And so having the states allows for the needs of the people to be addressed on a much smaller and individualized level.
Is that as important now as it used to be?
I mean,
I
it's a
think-
lot. Sorry.
Go ahead, Sawyer.
Okay. It's a lot less important, it's a lot less important now than it used to be, just because of how interconnected our America is nowadays. And now states do have specific interests, but a lot less so than they did in 18th, 19th century. So yeah.
Katie, what were you going to say?
Oh, I actually disagree with Sawyer. I think that it's more important now that we have states. I believe what Charlie was saying, answering the last question, how each state has
Finish your answer.
each state has like their specific economy, and for North Carolina, we have a very strong agriculture economy, and so does Wisconsin. And then if you go to other states, more up north, they're more port cities, and they rely more on like mills and textiles and different sorts of economy. So when you have these different states, it's hard to determine laws and national legislative, like we were talking about last question.
Okay, thanks. Well, thank you all. Congratulations. Yay. Okay, you've done it. You can relax for the rest of the day, right? Unless you're on another unit. So we're going to give you all some feedback now, and then we'll let you go about your business. I thought your opening statement was very well crafted. I thought that you, yeah, very well crafted. You hit on the appropriate topics. Bill of Rights dismissed. I mean, yeah, it was, but also because everybody said, well, the convention is over, we're leaving, you know. We're not interested in debating a Bill of Rights right now, you know. It's already September. So, and we're tired of Philadelphia. So, you know, that was, you might have said a little bit more about that, or put that in a slightly different context. I thought that you did a nice job with the issues that were not well addressed. You phrased that nicely. So citizenship, voting rights. I'm fascinated by your proposal to repeal the 17th Amendment. Because of course, I mean, that was as much as anything designed to get the power in the Senate out of the hands of party leadership and this sort of corrupt system that had developed. So it would be very interesting to try that and see if the corruption came back. I'm betting on yes, but I'll just, Madison's quote on refining and enlarging the public views, and I know you're going to talk about that tomorrow. Look at the context of that quote in Federalist 10. Because Madison in that paragraph is doing an on the one hand, on the other hand thing, right? He's not saying this is how they should represent. He's saying this is one possibility for how they might represent. So just be alert to that kind of, well, be alert to misleading questions, I guess is all I will say. But like I say, you guys, clearly you have been talking about this for some time. You've probably been arguing with each other. You argued with each other a little bit here. That's wonderful. It's okay if you forget a date, or it's okay if you blank on something, because we do that all the time. What's important is you are participating and you are exercising the qualities of the good citizen. And don't lose that, please. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much enjoyed the presentation. And I really normally try not to talk about what somebody else has mentioned, but I really was going to talk to you about the repeal of the 17th Amendment, because that took me off guard. If you had talked about the Equal Rights Amendment, if you talked about some new stuff to add to the Constitution, that would have been what I was expecting. Getting rid of some stuff was not what I thought. And so that was interesting. I also wish we had a whole bunch of time. One of the struggles that I have with my personal position on capital punishment, and not just the religious part of me that says you don't kill people, is what do you do about the person who gets life without parole, who decides to go to prison and kill somebody? I mean, what's your sanction on that person? if you don't have, I mean, and I know how I feel about capital punishment, but that's one of the things that troubles me. I mean, there are some pieces that I don't have the answers to that I would have loved to have thrown that to you and said, help me. And I didn't get a chance to do that. And I'm really disappointed because I love putting people on the spot. You all have done just a wonderful job. It's been really good listening to you. You and your teacher are to be complimented. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I agree with both of my colleagues. And I think the fact that we really focused on one thing you said, we know we have a whole list of questions we're supposed to ask everybody, but we really got interested in what you were thinking about the 17th Amendment, the role of states, and I wish we could talk about it all day because it's really clear. The three of you are very thoughtful people who have done your work and are able to make an informed judgment about these things. And we know you'll continue challenging yourselves and each other as you think about all of these issues. I also wish we could have talked more about the 8th Amendment and interpretation of it and the role of judges and other things. I mean, and your introductory statement really was masterfully done. It was both well thought out and very well presented. So, and I'm sorry, this is the first time I've judged the Nationals, so I'm sorry I haven't got a chance to see this school in action before, but you really did a great job, and I look forward to hearing from the three of you in your long lives ahead as citizens, as you are keeping the Republic, as Franklin said, it was up to you to do. So thank you.
Thank you.